Today we're discussing Parsha Vayeitzei. And he went. Because this Parsha is all about going and traveling and moving from one place to another. And it starts from the story of Jacob leaving his hometown, Beersheba, and on his journey to Haran, to his uncle Laban, because he is running away from Esau, who is obviously very angry for Jacob stealing basically his birthright. On his way, Jacob encounters what we call the place. Today we call this place Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And he actually sleeps there, dreaming of a ladder connecting heaven and earth, with angels climbing up and coming down on this ladder. God appears and promises in his dream to Jacob that the land upon which he lies will be given to his descendants. And in the morning, Jacob raises the stone on which he put his head and makes it as a now altar to a mizbeach, to a monument, and pledging that he will, this stone will be made into a house of God, which eventually, as we know, both temples stood there. In Haran, Jacob stays and works with Laban, the brother of his mother, Rivka, tending Laban's sheep. Laban agrees to give him his younger daughter Rachel in marriage, in exchange for Jacob working for 7 years for him, looking after his sheep. However, Laban, being Laban, liar and deceiver, instead of on the wedding night, because the bride is veiled, so the bridegroom cannot see the lady's face, his bride's face. So Laban substitutes Rachel with Leah, and the changeover is discovered only in the morning after basically Jacob consummated the marriage with Leah. Obviously he is upset, but Laban agrees to give him Rachel as well in a week time after the first wedding, in exchange for another 7 years of Jacob working for him. This is how basically Jacob finishes up with 2 sisters being his wives, and then, as we will learn in a few seconds, the concubines, the maid servants of his wives, became his wives as well. So Leah gives birth to 6 sons: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, and a daughter, Dinah. While Rachel initially remains barren, which is a major tragedy for Rachel and for Jacob, because he loves her. So Rachel gives Jacob her handmaid Bilhah as a wife to bear a child, to bear children, instead of her. And Bilhah brings 2 more sons, Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah does exactly the same thing and gives to her husband Zilpah, her maidservant, who gives birth to Gad and Asher. Finally, eventually, Rachel gets pregnant, her prayers are answered, and she brings to this world Joseph. Now, Jacob has now been in Haran for 14 years by that time, and he wishes to return. However, he has got already 11 sons, only one is missing, right? And he wants to return back to Beersheba, to his parents. But Laban persuades him to remain, now offering him sheep in return for his labor, for his work. And despite all Laban's effort to cheat on him and to deceive him, Jacob prospers. And after 6 years, he decides to leave secretly. So he leaves Haran with his family and with all his wealth, with everything he has got. And fearing that Laban will prevent him from living in his family, in property, which he was entitled to. He wasn't stealing anything. He left. But Laban pursues him, and overnight in his dream, God comes to Laban and tells him there is no way that you can harm Jacob or Yaakov. Laban and Jacob, as a consequence of this scenario, make peace agreement, and Jacob proceeds to the Holy Land, where he was met by the angels. That's the content of the whole parsha. There are many topics in this parsha, and I would like to concentrate on one. Rabbi Sachs, God bless his soul, he, in one of his articles, he raises a very important question. What is it that made Jacob, not Abraham, and not Isaac, and not even Moses, a true father of Jewish people? We are called Congregation of Jacob, or Children of Israel, which both names belong to the same man. Jacob, Yaakov, Israel. And we bear his name as a nation, nation of Israel. Yet Jacob did not begin Jewish journey, Abraham did. And Jacob faced no trial like Isaac on Mizbeach, where he could be sacrificed. He did not lead people out of Egypt, and he did not bring them down the Torah. So, even comparing him to Esau, he did not have a strong leadership character either, or any fighting capabilities. He was a yeshiva bucher. Like, his twin brother could fight. He was strong, he was physical, he had some ideas of how to lead people. So why he became the father of Jewish people, and why we are called Israel, which is his name, and it's not the name of Abraham, and not the name of Isaac, and not the name of Moses. So we are not called neither one of those three. It seems that the answer lies in this parsha, Vayeitzei, and the next parsha, Vayishlach. In order to become Jacob and then Israel, who became the father of the 12 Jewish tribes, Jacob had to go through the soul-grinding process of leadership development. Look at his life. He was forced to leave his parents and everything familiar to him in the promised land, exactly the same way as Abraham did. Abraham was told to leave. Jacob was forced to leave because he was afraid of Esau. He spent 14 years in Shem and Ever's yeshiva learning and basically comprehending in immense depths all of the Torah. Jacob endured very heavy rivalry of Esau and resentment of Laban and tension between his wives and children, the only death of Rachel, the loss for 22 years of his favorite son Joseph. When he eventually met the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asked him how old is he, this is what he said: "Few and evil have been the days of my life." Yet on the way, he encountered angels. He encountered angels helping him initially, And then he encountered angels, an angel whom he had to wrestle with. All of his life carries with itself the process of learning and a total aura of spiritual transcendence. He is connected to heaven, to the spiritual world, in more than one way than we can imagine. After encounter with the angel, he said, the angel said to him, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome. All of the above are the decisive spiritual encounters of Jacob's life. They happened in a space in between, neither at the starting point of his life adventure, nor at the destination when he eventually came to Egypt. Jacob is at risk from both directions, where he comes from and where he is going to. He is nearly constantly vulnerable, and he encounters God and finds the courage to continue despite all the hazards and all his life journey tribulations and trials. That is the strength Jacob has given to us, to Jewish people, to his descendants. What is remarkable, it's not merely that our tiny people survived tragedies that would have spelled the end of any other nation. The destruction of 2 temples, the Babylonian and the Roman conquests, the expulsions, the persecutions, the pogroms of the Middle Ages, the rise of anti-Semitism in the 19th century in Europe, and the Holocaust in the 20th century. It is truly astonishing that after each cataclysm, Judaism renewed itself, scaling new heights and achieving higher and higher levels. During the Babylonian exile, Judaism deepened its engagement with the Torah. After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, it produced the greatest literary monuments of the oral Torah, Midrash, Mishnah, and Gemara. During the Middle Ages, it produced masterpieces of law and Torah commentary and poetry and philosophy. And lousy 3 years after the Holocaust, the Jewish nation proclaimed that the state of Israel. The Jewish return to history took place after the darkest night of the exile. A few years ago, I had to undergo a heart stress test. And Rebbe Sachs is talking about exactly the same scenario. And what's happened to him, it was exactly the same thing what happened to me. The doctor got me walking on a very steep and very fast treadmill. And, I was huffing and puffing and nearly running. And when I asked him, what are you testing? How fast I go or how long I will be able to do it? He looked at me, smiled, and actually said, neither. What he said is, we will stress your body, and then we will be observing how long it will take your pulse and your blood pressure to return back to normal after you come off the treadmill. That is when I understood that health is measured by the power of recovery. And that is true for everyone. And it's true for people, communities, as well as nations. But even more so, it's true for the leaders and for the Jewish people, a nation of leaders, which is what it means being a nation of the priests, as we discussed earlier. Leadership, especially in matters of spirit, is deeply stressful. 4 figures in Tanakh were asking Hashem, were praying to him, asking to stop their leadership. They were prepared to die. Moses, Elijah, Jeremiah, and Jonah. This was not only true in the distant past, but relatively closer to us. Abraham Lincoln suffered deep bouts of depression. So did Winston Churchill, who called the depression a black dog. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King both attempted suicide in adolescence and experienced depressive illness in adult life. The same was true for many great creative artists, among them Michelangelo, Beethoven, Van Gogh. What affects what? The greatness leads to the moments of despair, or the moments of despair lead to greatness? We don't know, but obviously there is a very strong connection between these events. But Jacob was a more emotional and more volatile individual than either Abraham, who was very serene and very quiet, even under stress, during his trials, or even definitely much more emotional than Isaac, who was very withdrawn particularly. Jacob feared, clearly. Jacob loved with all his heart. Jacob spent more of his time in exile than any other of the patriarchs. But Jacob endured and persisted. Of all the figures in Genesis, he was the great survivor. To try to fall, to fear, and yet to keep going, that is what it takes to be a leader. That was Jacob. The man who, at the lowest point of his life, had the greatest visions of heaven. Shabbat Shalom.
Shine.